On today's news, huge WrestleMania plans have been revealed, potentially spoiling a Royal Rumble winner, WWE's rebranding, a pay-per-view, my review of SmackDown, Tempest review of Rampage, and more.
Support WrestleTalk!
As we are well into Royal Rumble season, we are basically in WrestleMania season again, and all seasons really do blend together. My god, it's 2022. With WrestleMania approaching, we are starting to get word about what the plans for the stupendous two-night chocolate-covered wrestling spectacular entail. Dave Meltzer has reported the original WrestleMania plans for both of the WWE Women's Championships in the most recent edition of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. In the report, Meltzer writes that Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch was penciled in to defend the title against Bianca Belair in a rematch of their infamous and extremely brief SummerSlam encounter. Lynch has been Women's Champion since beating Belair at SummerSlam. Notice how I didn't say Raw Women's Champion, because remember when they took their titles to a swap meet? That was stupid. Belair has been chasing the title since then, and with Doudrop challenging Lynch at the Royal Rumble, Belair seems to be like a solid candidate to win the Royal Rumble match and face Lynch at WrestleMania. This is compounded by what the reports say the SmackDown Women's title plan is, because if the reported plans come to pass, as Meltzer is reporting, Charlotte was planned to defend her title against fellow Four Horsewoman Sasha Banks, who is currently gonna miss the Rumble due to injury. Banks has been on and off on SmackDown with injuries in recent months and has not held the SmackDown Women's Championship since losing it to Belair at WrestleMania 37. Banks and Flair have had a long history with one another dating back to their time in NXT. They feuded multiple times and crossed paths at 2 WrestleManias, but never in a singles match. Of course, WWE's plans change twice in the time it takes you to make lunch, so it remains to be seen if these plans would happen, but betting on these 4 women to be in the main event picture come WrestleMania seems to be smart money. With the news that WWE will be returning to Saudi Arabia once again for their Elimination Chamber event, details have since come out saying that the company is rebranding the name of the show, because having an event called Elimination Chamber in Saudi Arabia is ironic for all the wrong reasons. Dave Meltzer tweeted Friday that WWE is looking at rebranding the Elimination Chamber the WrestleMania Chamber. Not official until it's announced. I mean, if you stack this and WrestleMania Backlash, maybe CM Punk was right and this is a 4-night extravaganza. However, before the day was out, Meltzer tweeted again that the latest proposed name for the Saudi pay-per-view is the Annual Elimination Chamber, because that solves the problem. What WWE ends up calling this show still remains to be seen, but it does appear likely that the show will undergo a name change of some sort this year. WWE has held the Elimination Chamber event annually since 2010, after it was rebranded from No Way Out. Maybe you could call it No Way Out again. Actually, cancel that, that's also a terrible idea. Jon Moxley has been out of action since October after entering an inpatient alcohol treatment program. He hasn't made a wrestling appearance since then, but now that will be changing, although it will not be in AEW. GCW has announced that Mox will be facing Homicide for the GCW World Championship on January 23rd. Moxley has beaten Matt Cardona for the title over All Out Weekend. It remains to be seen when Moxley's AEW return will be. Granted, wrestling is not the top priority when dealing with someone's health, but if Moxley is able to appear for GCW in this capacity, perhaps an AEW return will be on the horizon. And now it's time for my review of SmackDown in about 5 minutes. Thank you for being awesome pledge hammers on our Patreon page, Barbaric, Garrick Morgan, and Ronald Coleman, baby! You can get your own shout out and loads of extra bonus content by visiting us at patreon.com/WrestleTalk. So, this week's review is less of a review of SmackDown and more of a systematic breakdown of exactly why WWE products are very, very, very not good. Because it's felt like WWE is a stale corporate product with no soul for a long time, but it's been hard to pinpoint exactly why that is. I've gathered some evidence while watching this episode, so bear with me while I lay it all out. This show started with a 2.5-minute recap package of the Roman Reigns Brock Lesnar Paul Heyman situation with Seth Rollins challenging Roman Reigns. They announced it's going to be Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns face to face on tonight's show. All fine so far, though they really don't need the recap package to be that long. But then they cut to Seth backstage, who is waiting for his cue, laughs at the camera, and then they play a quick video montage of Roman Reigns, and then they cut back to the same graphic of them saying it's still going to be them face to face tonight. Yes, I know, you already told us that a few seconds ago. This is already raising questions about what Seth is doing backstage and why he's laughing at the camera, because it all feels very forced and staged, robbing us of that sweet investment because it doesn't feel real by the rules of their own world. They also announced that Lita is back tonight, and then the Usos come out to the ring, cut a promo about them retaining their tag titles last week, and announce a fatal 4-way to determine the next tag title #1 contenders between Los Lotharios, Cesaro and Mansoor, Jinder Mahal and Shanky, and the Viking Raiders. The Usos continued this comedy bit where they introduced everyone and continue to joke around on commentary. This is another notch in the what the hell am I watching column, because this doesn't mesh with their character in previous weeks. They've been portrayed as energetic, yes, passionate, yes, but always relatively serious and focused on making sure that everyone knows that they're the ones, whatever that means. This is compounded with the first match only starting 11 minutes into the show. The match begins and it immediately cuts to an ad break, so we don't even get to watch the wrestling. After the ad break, there was 3 minutes and 50 seconds of wrestling before another ad break. 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Following that ad break, there was another 2 minutes and 15 seconds of wrestling, and then the Viking Raiders won to become the new #1 contenders. This is the larger overarching problem with the show. The wrestling is unimportant, which is bad for a wrestling show. And I know people will say that WWE isn't a wrestling show, the wrestling is not what the focus is on. But the problem is, as much as Vince McMahon hates wrestling, it is still a wrestling show. If you don't care about the wrestling on your wrestling show, then what are you building to? Because you build to wrestling matches on pay-per-view or premium live event, whatever. If you don't care about those matches that you're building to, then the fundamental formula that your entire product is built around doesn't matter. It's a flawed system. If wrestling is the thing you're promoting, which it is, then you need to care about the wrestling. We then got a 1 minute and 10-second recap of Charlotte and Naomi from last week before Naomi confronted Sonya Deville backstage, where Sonya finally revealed why she doesn't like Naomi. That thing that should have been mentioned months ago and is the reason why Deville has been constantly attacking Naomi for months on end, screwing her out of every opportunity and making sure she doesn't succeed. So come on, Deville, what's the reason? Lay it on us. Direct quote from the show here. "You come waltzing in my office with your main character vibes when everyone knows you're just an extra." Firstly, what the f does that even mean? Secondly, in a company where stars and top challengers for titles cycle in and out frequently, this makes absolutely no sense. Sonya, in kayfabe, is a promoter, someone who wants to make the most money by putting on the best shows. If Naomi is popular, she would want to feature her more to make more money. Her justification for not pushing her is that she's just an extra when she thinks she's a main character, but she's proven that she can be a main character when she nearly beat Charlotte last week, so the argument is fundamentally flawed. It holds absolutely no water when you think about it for more than 2 seconds. And yeah, Sonya's a heel, we're supposed to dislike her and we disagree with her, but her character, and more specifically her character motivation, need to make sense for us to buy into her as a villain and someone we want to see fail. She doesn't feel like a person, she feels like a corporate placeholder, a superficial and fake obstacle that the creators of the show have made in order for the protagonist to overcome. And that doesn't gel with viewers, either subconsciously or not. Viewers pick up on this stuff. Sami Zayn then comes out to the ring, it cuts to an ad break, he comes back and he's on the ramp. Just another notch in the wait, what? He talks about Johnny Knoxville and says he can be a jackass too, and says he's going to go over the ring in a shopping cart, which of course he isn't, takes ages trying to do it, chickens out, and then gets Kinshasa'd by Shinsuke Nakamura, and then gets thrown into a crash mat by Rick Boogs. The commentary team were constantly talking and shouting over Zayn, which is just another annoying thing about the show, but that doesn't necessarily fail on a storytelling perspective. But what does is Sami Zayn selling being thrown into a crash mat. It's a crash mat. It's designed for people to fall on. Again, it's just another thing that makes the viewer, subconsciously or not, just go, huh, that's weird. Aaliyah backstage cuts a promo and says she didn't know the Guinness World Records was still a thing. This is another fault with WWE script writing in that babyfaces are inherently very stupid. Natalya said she wants her 4th world record, beating 3.8 seconds as the current fastest victory record. So she attacked Aaliyah before the bell, but Aaliyah got a roll up as soon as the bell rang and broke the record. This, in and of itself, is a decent little story. The execution was a little off in terms of timing of a few things, but there's at least a setup and payoff. Michael Cole introduced Lita, who made her return here, saying she's got 1 run left in her, so she wants to win the Rumble. She was interrupted by Charlotte Flair, who said she's old, and Lita said Charlotte has a giant head, and the crowd started chanting a giant head at her. Lita hits a twist of fate and stands tall. This was fine, apart from the giant head stuff. Sheamus faced Ricochet next as vengeance for breaking Ridge Holland's nose. This was the most wrestling we got to see on the show. 2 minutes and 20 seconds, then an ad break, and then 4 minutes and 10 seconds before Sheamus won with a bro kick off a handspring. After a recap of Natalya and Aaliyah from earlier, Sonya Deville takes off her jacket backstage because the thermostat wasn't working, so the room was very hot. Naomi comes in to say Sonya doesn't have her jacket on, so she's not her boss anymore, and wait, hold up. It was mentioned in the earlier segment by Deville that while she has this jacket on, she's her boss. And I thought that was more of a metaphorical thing, like, I'm not a wrestler, I'm a corporate person now, and unless you're facing me in a wrestling match, you can't fight me. But no, WWE literally meant while she wears her jacket, Naomi can't touch her, but if she takes it off, well, then it's free real estate. This is very stupid and bad writing. I shouldn't need to explain why. Kofi Kingston did a promo next where he was interrupted by Madcap Moss and Happy Corbin, where they said they should be called the Poo Day. Madcap Moss is not funny. Moss and Kingston wrestled for 30 seconds, then an ad break, then 2 minutes and 25 seconds of wrestling, and then Madcap Moss won clean. Former WWE champion, Kofi Kingston. That's all the wrestling we got on this show, by the way. Hope you were satisfied with that. The main event segment was the face-to-face segment with Rollins and Reigns, where Rollins said that Reigns could never do it by himself after the Shield days, but he could. He became WWE champion by himself against the odds. That was sort of his whole thing. Another check in the wait, what? Column. Reigns says Rollins is a waste of his time, and if he wanted to main event WrestleMania with a star, he'd have picked his wife. The Usos then try to attack Rollins, but he does some nimble acrobatic stuff and dodges them, including jumping off the commentary table and moving at the last moment so they hit the steps. He then left the ring, and that was that. There was no climactic payoff to this build, no closing angle or exclamation mark to end the show. It just kind of ended with Rollins walking away, which, as a viewer of the product, isn't a satisfying ending. It leaves you, subconsciously or not, saying, oh, okay, rather than, oh, can't wait till next week. That was the whole show, and it wasn't very good. I'm not going to give it a score because number scores are inherently pretty stupid, but on an episode that 12.5% of the show that we saw was actually wrestling, that's 100% bull. 15 minutes of wrestling that we actually saw and over 8 minutes of recaps as well. It's just not an enjoyable show to watch from a casual perspective, from a hardcore fan perspective. WWE shows are not enjoyable at a fundamental level. But anyway, here's Tempest with his review of Rampage.
A 1, a 2, a skiddly diddly doo. What's going on, WrestleTalk friends and fans? Tempest is back with another review of AEW Rampage in about 3 minutes. And to open the show, we had Adam Cole being followed by about 30 people, taking on Trent being followed by about 15 people. Adam Cole has had a really good run of matches on Rampage, and I did think this one was a little bit weaker than some of the other ones he's had, but still a very good time. Cole targeted Trent's neck in this match, and we got a ton of really cool reversals with Canadian Destroyers and Storm Zeros, and eventually Adam Cole was able to hit the boom and get the win. The crowd actually chanted boom when he hit it this time. It's working. I told you, Pete. I told you this was gonna work. I'm very interested to see what the direction of this rivalry is going to be, whether it's going to be the stepping stone feud before we get to Kenny Omega and the Elite against the Paragon, or if best friends get a little bit of reinforcements in the near future. I wonder who they could get. There is a show in Cleveland coming up. Overall, I thought this was a fun way to start the show. It gets a 4 out of 5. We then got a squash match as Shawn Spears took on Andrew Everett. Andrew Everett is a hell of a talent, although you didn't get to see very much of it in this match as Shawn Spears hit him with the C4 in about a minute for the win. After the match, Shawn Spears got to cut a promo on CM Punk and actually defined his role in the Pinnacle a little bit. I did like that detail because until now his role has just kind of been the guy who gets pinned. But he made it as if MJF sends him as the mercenary of the Pinnacle, and I like that he now has a bit more of a defined role. Even though the crowd was chanting Wardlow the entire time, I like the seeds that have been planted with the Pinnacle. I feel like everything is just kind of rolling right now. It's good storytelling. The match wouldn't get more than a 2 out of 5 because it is a squash match after all, but the promo afterwards does bump this up. I'm giving this segment a 3 out of 5. We then had a big 6-woman tag team match as Chris Statlander, Red Velvet, and Layla Hirsch took on Nyla Rose, The Bunny, and Penelope Ford. This was a really solid match. Chris Statlander has improved so much during her time in AEW, and she was by far the clear standout performer of this match. She locked Penelope Ford in the spider crab submission, and it looked terrible, in a good way, but terrible. I would have tapped out. I thought that was going to be the finish, but Layla Hirsch tagged herself in and ended up getting rolled up for the pin. The pin looked a little bit wonky, and the finish wasn't as clean as it possibly could have been, but I thought the direction of the whole match made a lot of sense for the story that they're telling. I like that we're getting a lot more personality out of Layla Hirsch, and I'm very interested to see what they do with her going forward. This match was a lot of fun. I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. We then got a promo segment from Ricky Starks and Jay Lethal, as Ricky Starks talked about Jay Lethal sticking his nose in Team Taz's business before Jay Lethal came out and talked a lot of shit about the FTW title. It appears Jay Lethal is going to challenge Ricky Starks for the FTW title. I'm not sure exactly when, but that match should be good, so I'm looking forward to it. Both guys had a lot of really good fire in this match, and seeing Taz get fired up on commentary adds a lot to the particular segment that he's in. Overall, this was another solid promo segment. I'm giving this one a 3 out of 5. And then we had the main event AEW World Tag Team Championship match as Jurassic Express took on John Silver and Alex Reynolds. This was a fantastic main event match. Some of the spots were a little bit contrived for sure, but I was still absolutely blown away by the work involved in this match, although I probably shouldn't have been. Both of these teams are excellent. It's really cool that John Silver and Alex Reynolds just 2 years ago were like the absolute bottom of the barrel, bottom of the totem pole, job squad losers of the AEW roster, and now just over the course of a few years, through BTE and through their own work getting themselves over, they've been able to establish themselves as a legit team as part of a main faction in AEW, and it just does so much to reassure me about the future of this company. It's good stuff. What can I say? I'm a big fan. They messed up the finish a little bit. It didn't look clean, but it still looked effective, so I'm not going to complain too much, and overall I just had so much fun with this main event that, hey, I'll let it slide. This main event gets a 5 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. There was a lot more promo work on this episode of AEW Rampage than I'm used to, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. It feels like this whole week of AEW programming has been one of those weeks where they really need to streamline the directions they're going with their storylines, and sometimes you need to do that. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Bang! Overall, I thought this show was a ton of fun. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. This was a must-see episode of Rampage. And that just about wraps it up for me. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on this week's show and last night's SmackDown, make sure you go over to WrestleTalk podcast later on today, where myself and Chopper Pete will be breaking down both shows in complete detail. Until then, take care, and don't sharpen your pencil while the teacher is talking. Bye-bye.
I think I've come up with the perfect team name for us. That
What
I
is
think
it?
is completely, there's nothing wrong with this team name, no faults whatsoever. It's Team Penise.
Shut up! Shut up! I'm dying! Oh my god! I did not know where you were going with this.